Hi, thank you so much for coming. I think I've said this like every time we've had an event, but Drake, who I haven't actually even ever seen in concert, but I've heard that he starts off his concerts by saying, "You could be anywhere in the world tonight, but you chose to be here with me." I mean, given the time constraints, I feel like you could be anywhere in the Bay Area tonight, or like maybe Greater California. But you chose to come here, and I really appreciate it, and I'm so happy to have you all join us. Thank you for coming. I always forget what I'm actually meant to say. I don't think there's that much, but so if you need to go to the bathroom during the event, women's bathrooms are over there, men's bathrooms are over there. So this event and this series of events that we've been doing, I know a few people have been here before. Sarah has come to a lot of our events. Started because kind of by accident, I was telling a couple of people, because there was an event I used to go to in Sydney, which was all about getting women together and talking about things. I mean, not just women, because there's lots of men who come as well, which is great. But just having a space where you can talk about things that excite you, and you can get excited about equality and making the world a better place in a way that doesn't feel like you're just getting tired or exhausted or talking about what's wrong with the world, but focusing on what we can do that is working and that's going to make things better. And so we started this, and it's been really nice. It's kind of small and intimate, but we get a lot of wonderful people who I think it's really cool. Get a lot of messages from people talking about how it's impacted them. So also, thank you to Atlassian, who are the ones who pay for everything. If anyone wants to work at Atlassian, which you totally should. You should actually, though. So I know that I talked to our CTO about this, and I was like, "Oh, we get this many people, and blah blah blah, and blah blah blah." And he was like, "Look, if you're getting more women in here, we need to have more women. We would love to get some more women into leadership, and so anything that gets more people interested in us and gets them coming here and knowing that we care is really good." And we do. So I know Kylie's over here. There's a couple of other Atlassians who can tell you that we really do put in a lot of effort into trying to make things more equal around here. So if you would like a job, speak to Kylie, and she will hook you up with a recruiter. But tonight, I'm really excited to have these amazing women here talking about social impact. So I might start by just getting all of you to introduce yourselves and talk about what you do and why social impact matters to you and what you're doing in this space.
Hi, I've met some of you before. My name is Charu, and I run an early stage startup called Next Play. So we help companies like Coca-Cola, Lyft, Square, etc., build internal mentoring programs for their employees. And the impact piece is, like I was telling you, one is upskilling, because the workforce is rapidly changing. And so how do you really onboard people faster, especially across generations? But second, and more closer to my heart, is inclusion. So how do you put systems in the workplace where everyone has equal access to advancement opportunities? Women, parents, LGBTQ folks, people of color, introverts. My boyfriend's a white male, but he needs mentors. So it's everyone's issue. So that's what I do, and I'll pass on.
My boyfriend is also a white male who also needs a mentor, so I will talk to you after this. Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Jin. I'm the global head of our corporate social impact at Medallia, which is a customer feedback platform down in San Mateo. How did I get into social impact? So I did not know what corporate social responsibility or corporate social impact or any of that even was when I first started it. I joined Medallia in the professional services consulting and services arm. And me and one other coworker really thought it was kind of ridiculous that we didn't make giving back as easy as possible for our employees, and we weren't highlighting those employees who were giving back so much. And we both believe truly that companies have a responsibility to leverage their resources, whether that be people power, their product, their space, whatever that is, to increase the impact in their local community. So we started out very grassroots, just having, volunteering and fundraising events on campus. And we had so much more traction than we had ever anticipated, and really show that employees cared about this. And I think it was a really authentic and really passion-filled way to start a corporate social impact arm. And then recently, about a month ago, the company has decided to make a commitment to make a full-time role and formalize and strategize this. And so I was the first full-time role for that. And so I'm very, very excited to be sharing this, and thank you so much for putting this on.
Thank you. I'll take this one. This will be for us too. Hi everyone, my name is Mallory Burke, and I work for the Atlassian Foundation. I'm based in San Francisco, but we are a very global team. The Atlassian Foundation's been around for about 10 years, about as long as the company has been. Our founders are very invested in giving back and it being part of our lifeline and blood of the company. They were co-founders of the movement, the Pledge 1% movement, with Salesforce I think it was about 4 years ago. If you don't know that, it's pledging 1% of your people's time, product, equity, or profit. Thank you. It's like one of the other P's. But yeah, so I've been with the company for just about 2 years, and my role is overseeing mainly our U.S. offices and engagement efforts locally. So trying to get our employees to use their 1% time, which is 40 hours, a full week of work doing whatever they love most, and also leveraging local councils. Matthew is actually on our council here in Mountain View, but we have councils in each of our offices. So our U.S. offices are San Francisco, Mountain View, Austin, New York, Boston, and I also oversee our remote community as well. So I sort of have a big role, unfortunately. I wish I had more help, but yeah, so really getting our employees engaged and trying to find some new ways to do that. My background is I worked for 10 years in homeless services in San Francisco, running corporate engagement projects, and then before that, I was in AmeriCorps with a great organization called Hands On Bay Area. And yeah, their executive director and head of corporate relations are over here. But yeah, so super happy to be at Atlassian. It's a really committed and awesome company. So thanks.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, hello, good evening. My name is Angie Mertens, and I'm the program director of a startup called One World Training and Investments. We're based in Palo Alto, about 3.5 years young ourselves, and we really invest in companies that want to profitably scale their social impact. So we provide training, as our name says, One World Training and Investment, and we also have a fund that invests in Bay Area-based social impact companies. So for us, social impact is like the everything that I breathe and do every day. It's totally involved in my work. So in our training arm, we provide a lot of events that are all local in the Bay Area to bring investors together with startups that are social impact driven. We have a fun food festival that's really focused on food entrepreneurs. We have a social impact film fest that's all around storytelling and marketing and how do you get the word out of this incredible work that's happening in the social impact field. Just tying it back, there's too much negativity in the world. So how do we really put the spotlight on the incredible things that are happening and really help people to scale and really amplify their work? As I said, we have a little fund as well, incredible different companies to look at. And how did I get into this world? So for me, like social impact was always really important since I grew up. I'm originally from Germany. I grew up in this beautiful, picturesque place with no problems. And I knew there's a big world out there. and I wanted to work with the local communities. So I started with education, social work, sociology, worked with a lot of nonprofits in India and Peru and Nepal, and then made my way up into working with UNESCO in the education field. So a lot with governments, and I thought, oh, how can I, really move forward the change on a system level? Is it nonprofits? Is it the governments? And then moved to the Bay Area because of my husband, who's sitting here in the audience as well. And I thought, you know what? This is a nice new challenge and chapter in my life. I know the nonprofit. I know a little bit of, the government. And how can you really use for-profit as a force for good? And, did a little bit of a fun detour of kind of figuring out where do I land here with this nonprofit background that I have, and thought, which company do I think is really mission-driven and changes a sector or a certain field in the market? And worked for Tesla and Fremont. Back then, there wasn't too many negative news than it is right now. But it was really interesting to kind of think through how a company really from its core can change a certain market or a certain entity on a systematic level. And then I kind of stepped back and thought, how do I bring my experience kind of internationally back to the Bay Area? And what I just love doing is bringing different stakeholders and groups together that don't really know each other. I love matchmaking. How do I connect investors with social entrepreneurs? And how do we funnel the most money into for-profit companies and support nonprofits along the way that have this very revenue-driven gene as well? So just in short, that's who I am and what I do.
So I thought it was really interesting that some of you came from not-for-profits and then moved to for-profits. And I guess one of the things that I often wondered before was sometimes it feels like companies have these like corporate social responsibility arms, but then the rest of the company is doing terrible things. And how do you reconcile that? And then how does corporate social responsibility go beyond that? And how does it compare coming from a not-for-profit into a for-profit? Sorry, I just thought I'd start with the easy questions.
I mean, for me, it was always kind of this ethical question, right? If you look at companies which are, and those are strong words, like inherently negative, like oil company or prostitution type of things or tobacco, and then you see they have those big philanthropic arms and kind of investing maybe in their local communities or in communities where they're basically destroying their land or their water and their food system. So that just felt inherently wrong to me. It's like, this is just totally greenwashing, whitewashing, however you want to call it. So this is not right. Like, we can't kind of kill the place where we get our food from. So I feel really strongly companies, especially in the 20th century and where we are right now, we need to do good and have kind of a purpose for the planet and the people that we work with. So I just really urge, if there are companies that do something like that and then do good at the same time, that's not acceptable. Like, this should be called out. There should be, metrics out there. There should be groups that really report on that, because it's not holistic at all. So I feel very strongly no go. And if you want to change something, kind of really figure out how those companies can change and working with their communities or kind of their supply chain or inherently just changing what they do. I think there's so much opportunity to make money and do good at the same time. So that's how I think about it.
Yeah, go for it. I think there's also kind of a shift in consumers now wanting or almost demanding that companies be more civic-minded and having a political stance on some of the human rights issues. And so I am hoping, with positive intent, hoping that the future is brighter and that there are less of these companies out there where they're not thinking critically about the stances that they're taking and the impacts that they're having, down the stream in their supply chain, whatever that is. And then also, I think in the future, hopefully, of corporate social impact, the planet and the impact that you make is hopefully part of your bottom line. There are a lot of companies out there, which we call B Corps now, where it's part of the triple bottom line. And I'm seeing that as being a trend, and hopefully even, I think the future is that all for-profit organizations will consider that as part of their ROI, their bottom line, their thing that makes them a competitive advantage as well.
Oh, yeah. And I know, like, I think a lot of the brands that I use have, like, these programs to recycle things and send them to people who are in need or, like, other things. And I feel better when I buy from them. But Mallory, I was really interested in coming from a not-for-profit to the for-profit world.
Yeah.
How's that different? And for people who want to make a difference, and if you're wondering where can I have the most impact?
Sure.
What would you say?
Well, I think it was a really interesting transition. I spent a long time kind of finding the right role for me. I really I shouldn't say I overstayed my welcome, but most nonprofit people will, except for me and Lou, maybe, there's like a lot of turnover in nonprofit. It's, it's a place that you're not getting paid nearly what you should be getting paid, and it's hard to live in a place like San Francisco and do really positive good work and stay positive yourself, and so I was lucky, and I had friends and a partner and stuff that could help me, but nonprofit work is really hard, and it's challenging. I spent a long time looking at different companies and trying to figure out what was the best place for me. There were a lot of roles that opened up that I just didn't feel connected to my bottom line, which, ended up being that I really wanted to educate other people. So I wanted to educate, about doing good in the community, and kind of what, harness everybody's best person, and who you can be, and use those skills and inspire from within. And so I went on a few interviews. I spent a long time, and I feel like, so I was at a nonprofit for 10 years, which I probably should have only been there for like 2 or 3 years. But, I finally found the right fit with Atlassian. The values really, really struck me. The foundation is really into education. That's like our bottom line is our goal is to help educate 10 million disadvantaged youth in 10 years, and that really struck me as powerful. This big, big, hairy, audacious goal, and just kind of like thinking big and thinking, how education can change the world. Working in homeless services is really hard and heartbreaking, and the cycle almost feels never ending. And so the idea of being able to start with youth and start with kids and work from a different perspective. But anyway, sorry, that was a long-winded answer, but finding the right company and the values that speak to you is super important. And I feel like there's a lot of companies out there that put their values kind of on the front page, and I think that's really important and something to pay attention to.
Yeah. I'll say one thing that gives me hope is also Atlassian Foundation and other foundations and corporate entities, I think, are starting to think a lot more about the types of nonprofits that they are funding and being more diverse and inclusive throughout the process too. And I think it's really fantastic to see that there are companies that are thinking about, let's not just fund the big name nonprofits. Let's look at really which are some of them that maybe aren't as well known, but really are doing incredible work in the community. So I think I'm seeing a lot of really great things happen.
Awesome. Yeah, I know we've got a program with, what's it called? The $1 a day program for Room to Read. That's it. I get really bad with the logic. I just forget the actual phrase that I want. And that's been really good. So we send a lot of money over to them. It's just been nice. So I know a lot of, you're all really involved in the CSR world. What would you say is the state of corporate social responsibility at the moment? How are companies thinking about it? What interesting things are people doing? What's the approach?
I mean, I can talk a little bit about from like the ecosystem perspective. So there's a lot of initiatives, around diversity, around like within the supply chain of a company. There's a lot happening. I see more and more events and, convenings among corporate social responsibility representatives, which compared to a couple of years ago, I felt they're kind of everybody does their own little thing and kind of in survival mode, setting up their own program. But I think there's more collaboration and convening happen. What really strikes me that corporate social responsibility at this point is a little bit in a 1.0 version. And there's things that really need to change to put it into the 2.0 version. So what do I mean by that? So I mean, traditionally, right, you have corporate social responsibility, company that you work for, they make a lot of money or maybe not as a lot of money, and depending on how healthy they are financially, you have the CSR department or a philanthropy arm that, depending on how successful you are, gets some money, right? And then as a company itself, you donate a lot of products or services and have this volunteering engagement. And I'm hearing a lot from corporate social responsibility representatives that we can only do so much within our little CSR bubble. But if you kind of look at the company at itself, like how do we increase the bottom line to make sure that we do socially good things and environmentally good things while increasing our revenue at the same time? So if you look at, the supply chain, for example, there's a lot of different ways you work with different customers, you look at different services that are sustainable, and you can, first of all, do better for the company and the planet, but then also get more customer loyalty because, as we say, we kind of figure out and see, do we want to buy it from Patagonia or like a Chinese company that uses child labor? I'm going extreme here right now, right? But there's a power of the people and as a consumer, but also as employees. It's this which company, where do I want to work? Especially the millennials and, Generation Z, which is approaching the workforce strong and happy and very demanding and very purposefully driven. It's like, I want to work for a company where I know they're aligned to my values. So I think this is a lot happening in the CSR field. So if people choose a company, I think CSR plays a role and the mission is important. But I see this trend of CSR 2.0. So we don't want to just have this little bubble on the side. And if the company isn't financially very successful, then we just stop it right away. We really want to see how do we implement that right away, in our company structure. And what we have created last year was kind of an impact profile framework where you can look at companies from the Sustainable Development Goals, which is made by the United Nations. So it's 17 different goals like clean water, clean energy, education, healthcare. You kind of look at a company and then also what are business drivers? So things that really drive revenue for a company, which could be employee retention, which could be having loyal customers, and kind of look at different departments and different things that the company offers through the lens. And I think that's a really interesting exercise, which we see more and more companies doing. Just again, say that it's not only within one little bubble and department, but how do we really make sure it reaches from the top down to the bottom up? Because many times I hear, yes, CSR gets supported if the leadership is on board, but if we have a transition on a CEO level or somebody on the top line, then it can be just right away. But if it's embedded right away from the start through the B Corp certification or through the mission, then you can't really do that. And just a quick sideline. So we work with a lot of startups that are just building their companies. They have their product and their service, and social impact is part of their DNA. So it like a Ben and Jerry's, right? They had their mission right away from the start, and even though they get bigger and bigger, they don't lose it. Or a Patagonia or a Cliff Bar. Shout out to Town Kitchen who is here, or to Next Play. Those are the companies, they live and breathe their social impact, and when they go big, get acquired, then if they have it in their descriptions, then it can't get lost. So just to touch upon a couple of things.
It's a little tangential from CSR, so I'll say it and then we'll have to come back to one of you. So like you were saying, I think there are these different models, right? So As an entrepreneur, I think of various organizations in a financial modeling sort of a way. So nonprofits, right? They rely on grants. Companies rely on certain things. So what a for-profit startup? I'm going to make my investors a lot of money. But my core mission, or the value we're offering to the world, is impact, social impact. And they don't have to be two separate circles in a Venn diagram that are just overlapping. It's one and the same to us, like you were saying. And there are actually lots of advantages that come from just being your own boss. So I have investors, but we're also profitable, so I can do whatever I want. So this month of March, it's Women's Month, and all of our team, we dedicated our time the whole month to mentor 100,000 women around the world. I don't need anyone's buy-in. But I wanted to chime that if you want to make an impact at large organizations, you have to navigate various constraints, but just also know that you're also your own person, and with your own time, you can go volunteer somewhere. You could start a company. You could start a side project. And if you want to have a sounding board on how you can start something, come talk to me. I'm very passionate about this. Just wanted to add that diverse perspective.
I love that you said that. I think the biggest takeaway that I always get from panels is whatever you're trying to break into, you can do it at whatever role or whatever position that you're in. I think you can carve your own path, and you should feel impassioned to do that. And I love that your app does that for people.
Thank you. So actually, so about 2.5 years ago, I met Heather at this panel, and I was talking about how I just resigned at LinkedIn to start this company. And the reason was I was so passionate about doing mentoring at scale for people, especially for women, that I really, really wanted to do it. Because I couldn't see a world where I would not do it. And I tried to make it work internally. It just would not happen. Because I had to talk to so many people, and nobody would go to this person. And so I just gave up. After 4 months, I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it on my own. But that's one path. Another path is you made it work at Medallia with patience and just tenacity. Good word. You made it work. And I was complimenting you before, but wanted to call it out. So there are so many paths, and congratulations.
Thank you. My heart.
So how do you make it work? Like, how do you get your business, if you're working somewhere, to be more involved in social impact, or like thinking about social impact more or supporting it more? How do you do that?
So I would say along the lines of what Angie was saying is you really do need to think about it in how does it impact the company's bottom line. So for us, we were thinking about employee attrition, hiring, marketing competitive advantage, and product and sales territory. And at that point in our company, attrition was a big one. So increasing the employee experience, how do we increase satisfaction within that? That was very important. The biggest portion and the most important one at that point was product and sales territory. So for me, actually, the biggest passion with our corporate social impact is how can we bring our product power into the hands of nonprofits? And we envision it really more like how Salesforce.org works, which is a separate social enterprise where the revenue brought in from their nonprofit partners are the ones that is the money given into grant making to support the causes that they care about. So that's how I envision Medallia to be in the future as well. But we focused on those two things and really pitched to our executives knowing that that was the goal of the company. And so I think first is knowing, that there is an appetite for it and starting it. For us, it was grassroots, but I'm sure for any company, it's knowing that there's an appetite for it and showing that there is, and then being able to tie that appetite to a grander vision that really can impact the organization. And I think every company is going through something where they want to increase, hiring or reduce attrition, increase marketing, whatever that is. It's almost always in those buckets. So it's pretty clear how you can make those connections.
Bigger tax benefits or breaks?
I mean, that's spot on. And it's really, how do you make social impact a business case, right? It's not this, oh, I do good. And yes, we feel good. We're so nice. But it's like, hey, this is a business case because employer retention, customer loyalty, marketing, sales, being in it for the long run. I could go on and on and on and on. And I just really urge everybody who is kind of thinking about having like a CSR or corporate social impact, how I want to call it, because we're on the way to 2.0, is really get the right people on the table. Like, don't stick in your little marketing bubble or HR or wherever it is. Like, go on the top and get people from the bottom and really have employees behind you, because there's a strong business case and plenty of examples. So go out, be bold, and just do it, because it happens.
What about when you have like a small startup who maybe don't have that much money? What could they do in terms of social impact apart from just, something monetarily related?
Just from experience around working with people so at Atlassian, one of our goals is to get more companies to take the pledge with us. So pledge 1% of whatever they want. And I do a lot of we have a large conference in March, and I try and get some of our partners and our ecosystem and stuff involved in our pledge. And I occasionally hear like kind of what people pledge. And I think it's really interesting because it could be like so vast of, how you're getting involved, your company. And there was this one company that said their 1% pledge was for every product, like their software product they sold, they gave a car seat to a mother in need, and it was just like a 1-to-1 match. And I feel like it really can be anything you want it to be. And everyone's always talking about like money and time, giving back to nonprofits and, volunteering your time. But sometimes it could just be really small, heartfelt connections.
And I think it really just goes back to the intent and the core values you hold as humans. So it's not about what's this project you can do. It shows in everything you do.
Well, to add on, I know like Atlassian started really early when you were still a startup, to be part of the Pledge 1%. So it's not something that you have to have a certain number of employees or a certain revenue. You can start right away from the beginning. You can be a B Corp right away from the beginning. We even encourage that. So it's not that you have to be successful. And then you can think about, let's think about social impact. Think about it from the start, and it goes hand in hand and becomes that one circle instead of this Venn diagram where there's a little part that's overlapping. Let's make it the core of what you do.
What is a B Corp and an E Corp?
B Corp is an organization actually based in San Francisco that help companies to become more social impactful. So they have like a whole certification process where you can, how do we treat our employees? Is there diversity? Is there inclusion, sustainability in terms of environmental things? So it's a really great opportunity for companies to kind of see where they are on the spectrum, and they have a certificate, and it's a great community and big resources in terms of how do you move your company forward a little bit in the sustainability field.
The board's legal obligation isn't just profits, it's also impact.
Exactly.
Oh, I didn't know that before. So speaking about all of these things, I guess what kinds of initiatives have you maybe worked on that you're really proud of?
Something that we did at Atlassian a couple of years, or about a year and a half ago, that I was quite proud of. We ended up getting 50 employees and all of our top level execs in the Bay Area to go to about 4 hours away to a prison in like, I think it was near I don't even know where it was. We just got on a bus and I couldn't even tell you where it was. But we went and we did a day in a prison doing like entrepreneurship training. It was like a Shark Tank style. They were doing business classes. And it was one of the most impactful days I've ever had. No phones in the prison. All, our president, our CFO, our CTO, our, CMO, everybody was there. And it was just a really interesting, impactful day. Lots of tears, lots of, they had a graduation at the end of the day. These prisoners had been through a training program for 6 months. And it was quite an incredible, eye-opening experience. We did a very deep dive called Step to the Line, where you kind of let a lot of you realize that you're very similar to the person standing across from you. And this, a lot of these people I wouldn't have thought I was similar to, but, it was just a very... it was a deep experience, and I'm proud of that I got people to kind of drop their hard edge of being, tech entrepreneur or whatnot. So it was a neat experience.
It's one of the initiatives or the work that we do. It's called a leader exchange program, which is each time really rewarding. So to give you an example, there's many times that CEOs or groups or companies that come from Europe to the Bay Area and they want to learn about social entrepreneurship and what's the secret sauce about innovation. Why is Silicon Valley such a fruitful place where ideas spark and how you can do things? So we had recently a group of from a big pharmaceutical company. So all their C-suite executives from Europe, Latin America, and the US, they came here for a week, and we had one morning with them where we basically thought, well, instead of teaching them about social entrepreneurship and innovation, let's expose them to incredible health companies in the social impact field and kind of have them on an eye-to-eye level and learn from each other in a peer-to-peer learning setting and really share what are the difficulties as a pharma company. Do you want to do good, and what is well-being, and how can you be center patient, and then kind of have entrepreneurs that are fully embedded in their social impact, and why do they do that, and they care so much about health, and really talk about challenges and difficulties and best practices and learning from each other. And the most rewarding thing for me was that they basically kind of did pilot programs with a lot of the entrepreneurs or flew them out. They did a CSR program in India. So one of the entrepreneurs works with a lot of Indian organizations. So there was a lot of cross-pollination happening out of that. And I think it's this magic of, who thinks about top pharmaceutical, representatives and bringing them together with early, health startups. But there's a lot of magic that happens. And when you see this magic happening in a field and in a room and kind of see where it leads to, yeah, that's why we do it.
One thing that I'm proud of that we did very recently actually is for Medallia, we have an offsite where all of the company goes somewhere. We, rah about what our company is doing and all that. And it's fantastic. But one of the sessions that we were able to do was, like I mentioned before, one of my biggest focuses is trying to get our product into the hands of nonprofits, but our product is not designed for nonprofits, right? It's designed for enterprise Fortune 500 companies. And so we created a brainstorming and ideation session during our offsite where we crowdsourced. We had our VP of innovation. We had our chief operating officer, like some people is from the C-suite all the way to, frontline. And we interviewed different nonprofits from different ranges of sizes, from different areas, asked them what was their obstacles when it comes to gathering feedback. So stepping back, Medallia, what we do is we gather feedback from all different types of sources, surveys, from chatbots, from Google social media reviews. We aggregate all of that feedback, bubble up insights from it, and then we consult with our partners on how to improve their services and their products and whatever it is based off of that feedback. So we envision a world where organizations are loved by those who they serve, so we can gather feedback from volunteers, from donors, from beneficiaries, from stakeholders within nonprofits and help improve their products, their services, their programming based off of that. But all that to say, what we did was we boiled that down into case studies and crowdsourced ideas of how to design what products we can offer to nonprofits. Again, this is very much like a beginning stage and a vision, a 5-year vision for our company, but it was really fantastic to see that there are people from all different lines of our businesses, from all different levels, who are interested in thinking about what we can change to design it for a different audience who really does need this feedback and this platform.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Project we worked on. I don't think of the things I do as projects. I think we should spend our time on meaningful problems we care about, and it takes a lifetime to solve those things. So I grew up in India in a family, and you didn't believe me, Vince, when I told you a couple of years ago, but women in my family are not allowed to work. And that's the reality for a lot of people in that country. And so when I was growing up, I just tremendously cared about creating equal access to education, economic opportunities, etc. And so I came to the US on a scholarship, worked really hard. But I realized how the US isn't so meritocratic, actually. It's not a level playing field at all. No. And I've just always cared about connecting people to role models, mentors, etc. So when I was in college and then my first couple of years in the workforce, for 5 years, I made a documentary film called Go Against the Flow. And then with some friends, I educated 1 million women around the world by having various screenings to help them start their own businesses. And now the company I didn't start it to start a company. It was very organic. So when I worked at LinkedIn, also not a level playing field. Great company, but it's just every company's problem. And so to pay it forward, because people had helped me, to pay it forward, I started a mentoring program for women at LinkedIn, and that just took off. And so I wanted to scale it. And then just nobody gave me their buy-in to actually scale it or build a product. And so I was like, I can't waste time. I need to build it. And so then I left, and then I met Heather around that time. And so then now we have this company. And so we sell it as a tool also for retention, loyalty, all of that, because, we have to show a business case. And it's, like I said, it's everybody's problem, including my white male boyfriend. But at the same time, we also just constantly it's who we are. It's our intent. We just constantly do things. Every month we host women's mentoring events in our office. This month we're mentoring 100,000 women. We don't have to. We love to. That's why we live. So that's my story.
Okay, so what about, I guess, in the broader Bay Area around the world, what are some interesting, I guess, ways that you've seen other companies, organizations having an impact?
One thing that I've found really inspiring is, so Salesforce actually does some really interesting stuff with schools in mainly in San Francisco. There's this program with the SF Ed Fund called Circling the Schools, and Salesforce has almost circled every school in San Francisco but I find that really cool that they have employees that are dedicated to different schools and kind of bringing events and funding and going to their activity nights. We circle one school in SF, but I think that's a really neat project that they work on.
Just to add on a little bit on Salesforce as well, when I think about the field and where things are heading, it's philanthropy, corporate philanthropy has been around for a long time and will be for a long time, and we need it. But there's a big conference that I can really recommend people to go. It's called Social Capital Markets. So if you're interested in social impact, it's happening once a year in San Francisco in October. And when I went there 3 years ago, it's like a 3-day conference. There was a lot of talk about philanthropy, social impact, social entrepreneurship. And then 2 years ago, I saw the first time kind of bigger companies being there, and Salesforce talking about impact investing. So it's something that's kind of new for corporations, which I think will be very interesting the next couple of years to see that companies invest in social impact companies, big monies, big bucks, and already kind of have pilot programs and offer that to them as well. So it's like Twilio, Salesforce, you too as well. Well, awesome. I didn't know that. Kudos to Atlassian. But this is something which I think, like, in terms of initiatives and things and trends that are happening, which will really, take it off, which is so much needed.
So I think organizations, whether funds or organizations like 1% Pledge, anything that really, or One World Training as well, any system that's helping fund more diverse founders, I think they're creating impact at scale. So I think that's worth calling out. So about a year ago, a bunch of female VCs got together and they started something called All Raise. You might have heard of it. And while they're holding office hours for female founders, they're actually primarily focused on getting more women in VC, right? Because women in VC don't have power. So how can they advocate for female founders? They're a tiny minority themselves, and that's a workplace. So they cannot, what is it called? Thump the fist on the table to advocate for people like me. And so I think that's really powerful to be able to funnel more women in VC, women writing check, because they understand the problem people like me are solving. And then it also changes the power dynamics on their board tables. Not a nonprofit. Actually, it might be a nonprofit, but the intention is to help funnel more female founders ultimately.
There's that, I guess, what do you guys think are the most effective kind of ways to have an impact, or what kind of things should people or organizations focus on? Or is that different for everyone?
Well, I always kind of like to think on the different levels, right? Like, how can you as a person have impact? Sometimes you feel like, oh my God, it's so overwhelming. We're in such a crazy world. How do we make it day by day, hour by hour, second by second? But kind of really, stepping back and thinking, how can I make an impact? And kind of knowing that you can, in your organization, in your company, finding places where you can associate yourself with, or just knocking on the CEO's door and say, hey, we need a CSR arm, and here's the case. So I think there's more power to yourself than many times I think we believe in. So I think that's one part. And then I really believe in, having supporting groups. I mean, it could be a mentor group. So I would love to learn more about the events that you have, and really finding some peer-to-peer circles where you can really get the knowledge that you need, where you get the exposure that you want. Or if you want to bring in some new themes, just go out there and try it. So it's more on that level. And then, wherever you are in your organization or company, just do it, because I can relate so much to what you said, Charu. There's no time to really wait for it, because if you don't do it and you don't see anybody else stepping up, well, then it's on you. So I think this is really how we can change, little by little and step by step. And I believe it's really, yourself, surround yourself, get to the right people, start with those little things, and each drops of water, they create some puddles in the river and the stream and movements and changes. So.
And to add on to that, I will say, really believe in yourself that you can do it, and don't. A learning for me was I had been told no, that you can't make corporate social impact into a strategic arm for a full-time role for that to happen. And that was a lot of the answer when I asked people who didn't have the decision power to do that. And it wasn't until I talked to the people who had who held the decision power that they were like, yeah, this is a great idea. We should do it. Let's do it. And I was like, okay. I wish I had saved myself so much headache and confusion and back and forth of if this was going to happen. I wish I almost just went straight to the source. And I know a large part of the reason why I did that was I was scared to do that. I didn't want to waste their time. I didn't want to, think that this was a stupid idea for me to bring up to them. But truly, if you believe that it's a good idea and it does benefit the company or the organization or whatever you're thinking about, don't just ask the safe people around you. Definitely reach for the people who have the power to make the change for you.
Yeah. No, that's okay. Yeah, exactly. I was just going to say one other thing that I've been working on as our company is scaling very rapidly is getting involved like at the very like day one level with people, being part of the onboarding process, really making sure there's a CSR component on that day one, inviting new hires to events, directly after their day one, mainly because I think that, I've been finding more and more pushback as like people are a year in, 2 years into the company, 3 years in, to get them, to take 2 hours out of their busy schedule. And, I know that everyone wants to do good and everyone means well. And, it's just life is chaotic and their jobs are so busy. And it's really tough, but really building it in from day one, I think, is super important. And that's where I feel like I'm having the most momentum is a lot of the new hires. So I would totally recommend that.
So it's not exactly answering your question, but I want to build on what you said, believing in yourself. So confidence doesn't happen overnight, right? It gets built up. So every time you have a little win, you get a boost of confidence. Every time you lose, somebody around you has to build you up and cheer you on, right? So I cannot emphasize enough, invest in your social capital. And I'm not trying to be salesy. I just really believe in mentorship. But there are different parts of it. There are peers who can support you. Maybe you're a partner. My boyfriend is my safe space. He's a one person I can say anything to. Sponsors, the people with power who can really open doors for you and be those advocates, whatever it is, and invest in social capital when you don't need it. And it's real simple. I mean, you have LinkedIn. It's free. You go on there, you search some people, you reach out to 10 people, and then 3 of them will say yes to get coffee with you. But even if you can get just one new meaningful connection a week, in a year you'll know 50 more people, right? So baby steps and really investing in your social capital.
Say that pretty much the only reason I am here to where I am now is because of mentorship and partnerships and finding those connections through places like LinkedIn. And it's all about connections. I think everything is about connecting points and building your network.
I know when I was talking to people before this that a lot of people had questions. So does anyone want to ask our panelists something? Yeah.
So I think the amount of words, if I have to use artificial intelligence, the one word which popped out during your conversation was nonprofit. And it popped out so much that I have a question about that. Before I ask a question, I would love to share with you, I think organizations in 18th century were funded with private donations, and that's how nonprofit word was invented. And nonprofit in 18th century was funded by churches and religious groups. And that's almost 200 years ago. So what would be a new disruption in your case, since you deal with nonprofits, and we live in 21st century and Silicon Valley? What do you think about this? Is the right age or right time to disrupt this word, or actually give some more meaningful context? If you can throw some light, since you work so heavily on this nonprofit, or at least you, who is actually brainstorming to support your software for nonprofits.
Is the question kind of like,
you.
what's next? I mean, and I'll pass. I mean, the thought that popped into my head, like when you were talking about, the disruption of the nonprofit space, is really the next iteration is these social enterprises. In my opinion, is just like how they're, putting skilled employees back into the workplace and, reinvesting into the community. And I think it's all going to come back to that kind of circle.
I completely agree. I think there unfortunately is a stigma that for nonprofits you have to use every bit of the money that you obtain towards the services to better the community, right? Where that is just not feasible at all. And the word overhead is just the worst thing possible when it really isn't. Any company needs something like that for it to be sustainable. So I completely agree. I think the only sustainable route for this to go on, and the new version, is that it's a social enterprise, so people aren't so scared of this word overhead, and that every dollar has to go towards the impact.
This is a bit meta, but you're originally from India, right? So India wasn't even a free country 100 years ago, which means the world was hugely colonized. And so 100 years ago, the world just looked completely different geopolitically. And we cannot even imagine what the world will look like 100 years from now. And so the geopolitics really influences how the economy functions. Who knows? Maybe there'll be no for-profit or non-profit. It will be all Bitcoin, which I don't believe in, but you just don't know. Do you have an opinion, by the way?
Yes. Before actually coming here, and I figured out, I was very surprised that US is the country which has the highest amount of nonprofits in the world, 1.75 million. Then I figured out how to actually get funded. It seems like per square mile, there are 5 nonprofits which are looking for fighting, literally the word fight, to acquire some funds. So is it really that executive director is really focused on funding, or is really helping to provide the value? Yes, he built this nonprofit to provide the value, but in order to sustain, something goes on, and I believe that's a white space thing which somebody can fill in it. And mentorship definitely helps, but at the same time, these nonprofits leaders have to open to call mentorship. And there's something called reverse mentorship at Harvard, where I went for in my securities. And actually, when you are mentoring, you're actually gaining knowledge. It's called reverse mentorship. So that's a big thing, but they have to be open, right? And they have to be authentic. Like at Stanford, I developed 30-in-30 program. So it's 30 minutes of mentorship every 30 days. It's a discipline where you start with 0 second and you really end at 30. And it's a constraint. And I felt a lot of leaders were uplifting because of the constraint. Not talking about first 10 minutes about weather, because I cannot change it, right? So the answer to the question is yes, but it needs a change. And I'm feeling that you guys are so grassrooted, so you can actually influence that change. Because the last time the one of the for-profit companies which disrupted was lights. Lights, the traffic lights were invented in 1838, just before nonprofits. But they are getting disrupted by city giving it data so we don't overjump traffic lights on red and yellow. So, but it takes 120 years for leaders of city leaders, like city of Palo Alto, is now opening up the data to say, okay, we'll give the data to a startup and they can prevent this whole preventative measure of jumping a traffic light. But I think we all have this knowledge and resources. It's just we have to open, collaborate, and really kind of disseminate to a lot of public. So it's a thought process. Yeah. It just comes with open thinking, I guess.
And I think the interesting part is, right, it's just a different legal structure. So there's so much happening between for-profit and non-profit legally. And I say there's no black and white world. I think that was yesterday or hopefully 10, 15 years ago, where you say non-profit, they only do the good things, for-profit, the bad things, and da-da-da-da. We don't have that black and white. There's a lot in the scale in between. There's a lot of non-profits. They have revenue arms. There's a lot of for-profits that say right away from the beginning, we have a nonprofit on the side as a social enterprise. So I think there's a lot happening in the field. And it's just a different legal structure, right? And it's a different purpose of what you do, right? Like a lot of the social enterprises, they're for profit, a lot are non-profit, and depending what you offer and provide, there's a lot of thought process why you choose a certain structure. So I would just really urge to, this is not something from the past, because there are a lot of new things happening in the field. So, and I mean, you have a for-profit and a non-profit, Eric, so.
First of all, I want to commend each of you for the work you're doing. It's amazing. And for the disclosure, I do work for a public benefit corporation, for profit, for public benefit. And, I'm excited about living in this area because of the change process and how people are thinking about it. I think the world that we live in today, there's more focus, whether it's because there's books that are being published on it or whatever it may be. A lot of individuals are focusing on, for-profit social enterprises that are out there, basically able to create a business model that's creating impact as well. And it seems to be what, the general population is resonating to and starting to adopt. I agree. If you haven't been to social capital markets, it's a wonderful, very impactful couple days. Hearing from a variety of different impact investors and individual entrepreneurs that are actually creating change in the world. And to Angie's point, start small. I think it just, 1 + 1 = 3 in this type of equation with the impact that we can create together. And then the last thing I would say is, and again, we're a service company at the end of the day. Your CSRs, there's another way to think about impact is change the spending you have in your for-profit and direct that to social enterprises, right? Because that, in a lot of ways, will 5, 10, 20x the impact that you can have with dollars. And at the end of the day, you're still going into the CFO asking for the money, but you're also balancing it with here's the impact we're creating as well. So.
And quickly, since you mentioned SoCap, I just want to throw it out there because there's a lot of women here in the group and interested in leadership. Check out Social Venture Institute, Bay Area. So it's a leadership program for women in the field. There's one happening in April in Marin County, and I got an email. There are 4 spots left, and they have a scholarship program to apply. So if somebody's interested in the social impact field and what you do, just a quick shout out.
Anyone else got a question?
And so you guys touched on this a bit earlier, but workforces are becoming more remote and more global in nature, and impact is different in every geography. So how are you and your companies thinking about how you can engage the local workforces when you are based, say, in the Bay Area?
I can talk. So one of the ways that we've been trying to tackle that is kind of creating local councils. So each office kind of has their own pot of money. So for instance, like we'll give the foundation, which is getting 1% of the company's equity and what's funding the foundation, then we're taking, say, $90,000 and giving it to the San Francisco Council. And then they're deciding how they want to spend that. And I'm always about high engagement, high impact. So, if they're going to invest in a project, it has to have those two assets. So it's nice because it really gives the local office a lot of power to feel like they're making positive change in their local community. So we both give globally. So we have this, large global, where we're funneling tons of money into, big nonprofits in India and Cambodia and stuff like that. But we also have this local level, and that's really decided by the employees. The remote community is a very interesting one, and I'm still trying to figure that out. So if anyone has any ideas, but I'm really going in the vein of virtual volunteering and figuring there's some really, really cool organizations that are coming out. Like one is called Catch a Fire. And Achieve. So like really doing things on a virtual level. But it's a tough one. I have some other ideas out there around remote stuff, but it's kind of like how if somebody's using their foundation or their volunteer time in a certain area, if they're able to tell a really impactful story, we could fund that in that space. It's hard to give money to one city and not to another in the remote community. Like, why are we funding Portland and not, Chicago or something? I don't know. If you have any ideas, I'm open. Yeah.
How big is your company?
So in a way, I work for the council, because so in my mind, I'm supporting them and letting them be the decision makers, and I just give them strong opinioned ideas, but, that kind of way. So recommendations, that's a better word. Thank you. Like they look to me for ideas and answers, but at the end of the day, they're the ones deciding where that $5,000 grant is going to go. I know.
So we operate in over 85 countries, and so it's really hard to determine who we should be talking to in even each of those countries. So that's why, like in this space, it's a way to get into multiple markets for us, at least through companies that have offices in a lot of geographies. So
talk to hands-on Bay Area. Yeah, we've started working with Hands-On Bay Area. Their international and national arm is called Points of Light, and they're in a lot of markets, so they're a great resource. Sorry, sound like I'm getting... No, I promise.
Does anyone else have a question?
Okay, so our company is... Last week or the week before, it was about 30 people, and I'm not sure what it is this week. We're in that phase. But all our guys are mostly guys. But they're also, we actually have an unusually good distribution of ages in our company because we have a lot of experienced hires, including moi. But a lot of these people also have families. And so, they're working their butts off because we're a startup and they're trying to get those first couple of customers running up and live and things like that. And then they're, dashing home to go pick up their kids. So ideas for a group that, is pretty diverse and doesn't have a lot of time. Any individual doesn't have a lot of time.
I actually kind of have an answer for that. So I know in our Sydney office, for example, we've started hiring some people for a couple of roles who are mentally disabled. You can hire people who are ex-cons, things like that, for certain jobs. Looking at your supply chain, I know again in our Sydney office, we started buying stationery from a company that, I don't remember the exact details, but I think they hire people who are like Town Kitchen, for example, who we also have used a couple of times. So even if you can't have an impact directly, I think looking at other ways where the people you're giving your money to and the services you're using and the people you're hiring, or the things you're buying are from other companies that are having an impact.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Also, when time is a constraint, which it typically is a constraint for almost every company, bandwidth and time, I think you just have to really leverage the existing processes and time, like meeting time, let's say, that's already in the books, right? So having let's say, a volunteering or fundraising event in, let's say, like a leads meeting, a meeting that's already happening. So if you're already having a team bonding event, make that into having a social impact lens. So you're not adding net new time for someone, or for programming and processes that are already there in the company, let's say for referrals. Most companies typically have a referral program where if the person joins the company, you get $1,000, let's say, making that option of being able to donate that $1,000 to a charity of your choice. So it's not added time for someone to do that. It's just how can we make the processes that we already have a impact lens to it.
And I would just say also leveraging like you said, like the off-sites or on-site off-sites or stuff like that. So when your teams are doing, have a 4-hour chunk of time where you're working, add an extra hour and do, a lunchtime activity together. Also, I know some great companies that do, we wouldn't work so well doing this, but like weekend activities, like involve your family. There's tons of stuff, especially in the like San Jose, Silicon Valley area with, activities with kids that, you could do a big, picnic. Oh, well, that might be a little tricky, but yeah, I'm all about embedding it into offsites. So.
Yeah, we've done that. My team during the day, we went and volunteered together and used that as our one of our team bonding events.
Yes. It helps ground them. I mean, we've had I wasn't ready for that. Let's have the
Sarah, right? Was your question specifically about CSR, when to do with these employees, or just generally?
I'm the extrovert. Anyway, but company, how do we get stuff like that?
Well,
But it's kind of like this small.
I would bring stuff on site, and I'm gonna, sorry, one more time, call out Hands on Bay Area because they have a really cool program called Volunteer in a Box or Project in a Box, and they'll ship it to your office, and you do the project, and then you ship it back. I think that's really brilliant. What, these two? Yeah. Sorry, I keep doing that, but I think you guys have amazing programs. So.
No, this is a great thing. 5 years.
Yeah, you can build mail.
And just an additional idea, like to kind of add it in your everyday life. If you say, you have lunch, at your company and order it in, maybe you have somebody like the Town Kitchen as a catering company, which is social impact through and through, and say, hey, we would love to have a person coming and talking 10 minutes about what we do. And it's incredible youth. They can tell their story, and you can kind of build that into your brand that whenever you hire a catering company or a marketing company, or, if there's food left over at an event, that you download the Copia app, which is also a company that comes, picks up the food and brings it to homeless people or nonprofits that are local. So I think there's so many little things. You can just build a culture of, yes, we do care. And yes, this is how we can do it. And I think little things like that really change the mindset, and people get inspired and say, hey, next time, let's do this, or how about this? And it's just the little things.
Yeah. That's what.
So food is always great with connecting people.
Order cupcakes.
Incentivize.
I have a broader comment on sort of like ageism. I know that's a general perception. Hiring managers or just colleagues think, oh, you're a parent, you don't have time. Parents on my team work longer and harder than the young people on my team because they don't even show up until it's 10 a.m. in the morning, and then they need their matcha latte, and right? And that's okay. I like matcha latte too. But just, everyone has a life and everyone has things that are important to them. For some people, it's kids. For some people, maybe it's running or whatever you care about. Um, and this is a bit controversial given just the geographic location we're in, but we're a young startup. We're like as lean as it gets, and nobody on my team, well, no, the founders work a lot, but no employee on our team works more than 50 hours a week. And that's really important. And if they cannot do their work in that time, that means there's something seriously wrong in how I'm setting goals and how I'm creating structures for people to collaborate. So just we're giving really good returns to our investors, so that should not be an excuse. Don't want to create trouble for your company, but something you can hold your leaders accountable to. And again, going to business case, talk about burnout. Have you read that article about anxiety economy? Anxiety economy. If you Google it, you'll see a bunch of articles. Yeah, so if you just treat your employees like humans and let them have a life, they're going to stay longer, do better work, as opposed to getting burned out and then having I don't know, tendinitis and needing to take time off.
And there's something, just a final thought, something called Wisdom Labs. So it's like, how do we create wiser companies and wiser people in companies with some really fun, actionable things? It's an app. They also kind of within a company itself, you can become, what's it called, an ambassador and become some online training. So I think there's so many little tools out there where you can kind of infiltrate or really kind of say, hey, we're different, we create this culture. And that's the beauty, you're early on. So if you don't do it now, it is so hard. Once you're a bigger company, it's maybe even game over depending how your CEO is in the structure. So building a company starts from day one in the company culture. So
I think Charu hit on a really important point. Trying to push this upstream. I got tired of big companies as well. As hard as it is fighting for money and everything else. You're not seeing that with your CEO. But honestly, I would look to go somewhere else. Great segue. Great segue.
Thank you.
I feel like Mallory is here.
I was just going to end by saying also, I think we're basically out of time, but there's a program I know that we have, because we found a lot of people were finding it hard to take time away from work to volunteer, but I think it's called the 500 Project. And so you can actually do things which are kind of work related, but like, for example, a lot of nonprofits use our products, so going and helping them set it up, helping them, do things that are related to our products. So for people who work on those products, you can still look at it as customer research or learning more about how people use this or, doing things like that. But also they find it really useful. And people pay a lot of money for Confluence admins or for people to set things up for them. And so there's I don't know what your company does, but if maybe there's something like that where helping out, it doesn't have to be nonprofits, helping other people do things in a way that also helps your employees learn something that's going to help them in their jobs, and looking for things like that. Do you have any final things to say?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
I have one question for you. What have been your top 2 takeaways from this session?
That's a big one.
I think it was interesting, the not-for-profit versus working for a profit place, that question, because that's something that I think I've struggled with or thought about a lot as well. And I loved what you were saying about the way not-for-profits work at the moment. You kind of like you're built to burn out. You don't get paid very much, and it's just a not super sustainable model. And that if you're working somewhere that is for profit, you get to focus on impact without having to think about your funding all the time. And you get to also look after yourself as a human being. And I was like, oh, you know what? Like, if you really want to have an impact over a long period of time, I think that's a much better way to do it, because you're not going to just end up struggling yourself. And like, if you are, I think you also struggle to do good work. When you're struggling to feed yourself or feeling burnt out. Just the whole thing about the B Corp certification and also becoming an E Corp. I had no idea that was a thing you could do. I think that's really cool.
So it's B Lab, and thanks for clarifying here, Eric. So it's the B Lab, they have the B Corp certification. There's a public benefit corporation when you build it in, your contract and when you set up your company. So, look at that. And somehow I feel like if we ended on a note that nonprofit is bad and you're burned out, I feel very bad to end it, because it is not like this everywhere, right? There's for-profits where you're burned out and you don't have good money. So there's a lot of great places. I've also worked for incredible nonprofits where, the salary was okay, depending where you are, and you have to take into consideration, we're in a very expensive place. So if you work for a nonprofit somewhere in Nepal or in Michigan or in Germany, you have a great life. And it's amazing mission, and everything is needed. And I think it's this continuum where we don't have to think black or white, money or no money, good or not good, but there's really a lot of sweet spots. Just wanted to put it out there.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Please feel free to stick around for a little while and talk. Grab some food, grab a drink.
Thank you, Desiree.